Hello coders, good afternoon, good evening in fact. It is 5 minutes past 8, 7 minutes past 8. I'm a little bit late, I do apologise. Welcome, it is episode 85 of the How to Code Well podcast. It is the 17th of December, I should have known that by now. 17th of December, episode 85, and today's topic is going to be centred around 5 things I would learn in 2021 if I was a new software developer. So for the past couple of weeks, I've been thinking about if I was to start again in 2021, what are the things that I would like to learn first? And what are the things that I wish were taught to me when I was studying as a developer? And oh, hello. Thank you for joining, Bernard. Thank you very much. I should say this is live. This is live. So if you've got any questions, then please do ask throughout the show, and I will answer them probably at the end, if not in between. So thank you for joining, Bernard. Thank you very much. You're asking about a Laravel course. I will answer that later, if that's all right. Before we get into the topic, which is the 5 things I would learn in 2021 if I was a new software developer, I just want to do some housekeeping first. So first of all, there is episode 84 and 83 now are available on the podcast players, Spotify, Google Podcast, iTunes, all of that stuff. I do apologize for not getting these out sooner. It's just work at the moment. It's been quite busy, so churning these out after I actually do a live stream, I've got to wait for it to sort of encode and all that jazz, so it doesn't happen as quickly as I would like it to, but I'm going to try and sort that out in the coming weeks and months as we go on. The next thing is that I've added a suggestions channel to the Discord server. So if you go to howtocodewell.net/Discord, if you haven't joined yet, there is a suggestions for HTCW, How to Code Well. So if you've got any suggestions, as Bernard has just mentioned here about Laravel, if you're on the Discord server, you can put in suggestions there too, and I will look at those and consider those for new content, new tutorials and courses going forward. Excuse me. And also version 1.6 is now available on the Simple Image Grid. This is an NPM package that I've been creating for, well, a Simple Image Grid for the How to Code Well website. So that is available. I just published that a few evenings ago, which is awesome. Okay, so let's get into the guts of this. The 5 things I would learn in 2021 if I was a new software developer. Because, when I learned programming, I think I did it wrong. I think I learned it in the wrong way. And it's only really now that I've actually fully appreciated, I say now, in the last few years, I've fully appreciated what programming actually is. Going through university, college, full-time work, and doing different projects for different disciplines, so different industries, agricultural industries, e-commerce industries, all sorts of systems for monitoring, that are sort of not on the web, that kind of stuff. I've done all sorts of bits and pieces, and it's only on reflection that I have sort of established this sort of thought process of what programming means to me. And if I wish someone would have told me that right at the start, I think I would have been able to skip a couple of hoops. So I've locked this down into 5 things. So 5 things that I wish someone would have told me if I was to start programming again in 2021, and I thought it would be great to share that with you. So the first one is to care more about the concepts of programming than the tools. And throughout these, what I'll probably do is end up going off onto random tangents. If you watch the live streams, the Twitch streams, you'll know that I go off on random tangents, so I'll probably do this today. So care more about the concepts than the tools. Okay, what is a concept and what is a tool in terms of programming? So a tool is the IDE. It is the thing that you use to do the thing that you want to achieve. And there are many things that you could do, that you could use. There's many IDEs. The programming language is itself a tool. And one of the biggest mistakes that I think I made right at the start was that I got too hung up on what programming language to learn. And also, I was studying, it was both self-taught as well as studying at college. I did 2 college courses and I went to university. Each of those times I was studying something new a new programming language, but the essence of programming was never really sort of established, not in my head at least. And so I learnt very quickly to dislike programming because I disliked the tools that I was using. So, for instance, the first programming language I learnt was Visual Basic 6. Then it was ASP Classic. Then it was Java, Perl, PHP, and I didn't like Visual Basic, not at all. I just didn't like it. It turned me off of programming. I didn't like Perl. That was very frustrating. I hated Java when I was studying at the time, and each one of these things made me feel like I didn't want to progress because I was struggling with this thing. And the trouble at that point was all I knew was what I was being taught. So I didn't even know what PHP was when I was learning, say, Visual Basics. I think even before that I was using I did a bit of Basic itself, the BBC stuff. So I was very sort of dialed into the thing that I was studying, and that's the world that I was in, and I thought that was the only world that I would ever get into, and I was finding it frustrating. And the point of this is that is to try. This is point number 2: is to try all the things more than once. So I disliked Java, and so I've never used Java again. And whether it was the way it was taught to me, whether it was just my childishness at that time, maybe it was because I didn't allow my brain to expand and understand why Java was so Java, because I learned Java before a lot of flexible languages, and I didn't realize the flexibility of those other languages. So try as many things as possible. But the thing is, to do with caring about, going back to point 1, caring more about the concepts than the tools, let's talk now about what the concepts are. So if you don't know what an IPO is in programming, then do stick about. Okay, so it's understanding understanding the principles and the concepts that all programming languages share. This is in my opinion. And there are, and it's taken me a while to realize this. There are several core principles and concepts that every programming language, every tool shares. And some do them slightly differently, but they really go back to their core principles. For example, just things like knowing how to create a variable. Okay, every programming every programming language has a variable. Every programming language has a means of looping through variables. There are many design patterns shared across programming languages. And so if someone said to me, look, don't worry too much about Visual Basics or Java or Perl, learn and be more concerned with the concepts. What is a variable? And then, FYI, now you know what a variable is. You know the data type. You know how to create a variable, how to assign a value to that variable. Oh, by the way, you can also do that in language X and language Y. You don't have to be using this language all the time. And at the time when I was studying, I only knew that one language that I was studying. I didn't appreciate the world of programming because I didn't appreciate the concepts. So IPO. So every program has 3 states. The first is input. So this is inputting data into the thing, into your application, into your programming, regardless of what it is. It could be a program that is on the web. It could be a website, for instance. It could be an application that reads temperatures, right? So that's an input, sensor input. Okay, so there is an input. There is also a process, which is P. So that is what happens to that data. It is the process. This is very abstract terms, but every application has this. Now, the process could hand off to something else, which means that becomes an input to something else. It could be storing it somewhere. It could be doing a calculation on that inputted piece of data. After it's been processed, there is an output. Now, that output could be just printing it out to the screen. It could be, sending an email. It could be doing all sorts of different things, but you end up with these 3 states. IPO, input, output, input, process, output. And once you establish that in your head, then you can look at other programming languages and go, it's just an IPO. That's all it is. It's just structured slightly differently in the street furniture that is the other language. So it doesn't matter if it's Java. It doesn't matter if it's JavaScript. It doesn't matter if it's PHP or Perl or Python. If you think of an input, a process, and an output, and then you tackle a problem and you look at it in that sense, IPO, how many inputs, processes, and outputs in that application, and then let's sort of decouple the problem into smaller little chunks and then work on each individual thing. If that was taught to me when I started, that would have blown my head. I mean, that I didn't appreciate that. I didn't appreciate it. And I remember coming back from at university, and one of my friends who was doing a robotics course at the time, he mentioned that he was building a robot for his university degree, totally different university to where I was. And he said, "Look, this is the code that I was using. I forget what it was. I think it might have been C or something like that." So I had a look at the code, and it was like, "Hang on a minute. I can read this. I can understand what your robot is doing because what I'm looking at here. Yes, it's in C, but what I'm actually looking at, if I look past the street furniture that is the language, I am looking at the inputs, the processes, and the outputs." And in the sense of the robot, it was like, well, you've got your conditions, your conditionals. And I think, if I remember rightly, this robot was sensing its location, and if it hit something, it would reverse or go the opposite way. And so it would read from sensors, inputs. It would decide what to do. That would be the process, and then it would output that, as in it would change direction, and it would be writing to a log file as it was doing it. So it was just like, hang on a minute. I've spent 6 years studying web development, 2 college courses and a university degree. I come back home and I have a look at this robot and I see the code and I can read the code. And that was mind-blowing. It was like, wow, I can build robots. It's code. It's code. It's because I appreciated the IPO, and I could see. I didn't understand the C, right? The actual language. I didn't understand the syntax, but I understood how that robot worked because I understood the principles and the concepts of programming. And it's something that like I said, it wasn't ever mentioned to me that, oh, by the way, these things also can help build all sorts of stuff all over the place. I was so concerned with web development. That's all I thought code was, which was, it sounds daft and ridiculous now. So yeah, care more about the concepts than the tools. And another point to this is that the tools come and go. I mentioned this many times, especially if you use a tool, for instance, a framework like jQuery. I remember I learned vanilla JavaScript, and then I just did a jQuery. That's all I was doing, jQuery, and which was fine. But obviously, jQuery is not used as much, and unfortunately, because I was just in the world of jQuery for many years, whilst I was fully employed, full time. JavaScript itself, the language itself, went on without me. So when I had to do a project that wasn't jQuery, I then had to relearn or learn more about JavaScript because I was left behind, because I was still in this world of JavaScript, this framework world, and then after several years, jQuery has started to die out. I haven't done a jQuery project in 3 years, something like that, 2-3 years, and so if you're still in this sort of little bubble of your tool, that is the only tool that you know, then and then you get asked to do something else that is fundamental, the programming language, and you haven't had the opportunity or given yourself the opportunity to follow that change in that language, then you're going to get sadly left behind. So that's another thing that I would suggest to myself in 2021 is to be more concerned with the language than the framework. But we've mentioned that many times before. The next one, I've mentioned try all the things more than once. So don't get too hung up on the fact that if you're struggling in Java, try JavaScript. If you're struggling in Python, try PHP. If you're struggling, understanding the programming language, then choose a different language. If you understand the concepts of programming, you can transfer those skills into other places. Now, obviously, certain programming languages have their own way of doing things, right? Some are more geared towards memory allocation. Some are more geared towards stronger data types. Some are more geared to object orientation. Some are more geared to functional programming. Fine, but if you start getting depressed and frustrated and angry and annoyed that you aren't progressing, then you could always just turn tail and go somewhere else in the world of programming. Same with frameworks. If you're struggling with a framework, say for instance, if you're struggling with React, then don't dismiss JavaScript. Dismiss React, try Vue, try something completely different in JavaScript world. Don't just think, oh, I'm having such a bad time with React, I'm going to not do anything else in JavaScript. Why am I even a JavaScript developer? I should have chosen the back end. No, React is very opinionated in its own world, so try something else. Okay, number 3 is broken up into 3 sort of sections. And this is ask yourself 3 things when debugging. Because we always, most of this time we spend programming is time spent debugging, right? We are always debugging our code. And code will only do what you tell it to do. Okay, it's not going to suddenly magically go off somewhere and do something completely different. It's not going to just suddenly, spawn its own intelligence and do something completely different unless you've come up with some crazy AI thing. But let's bring it down to earth when we're talking about new programmers here. So when you are debugging something for the first time, there are 3 things that I would recommend you ask yourself. The first one, it really comes back to the first point, and that is, have I... well, no, it doesn't. The first one is, have I read the task, stroke ticket, stroke challenge more than once? So a lot of times we get programming wrong because of human error, because we haven't read the thing that we need to do more than once, right? How many, like if you do a maths exam and you're struggling with the maths exam, you sat down with your pen and the paper and you're reading it, keep reading the question. If you don't understand what you're going to do, keep reading the question. Sometimes it clicks, And this is the same with programming. If you've got a problem, if you're trying to solve a bug or a ticket or add something to a new feature and you're not sure how to come up with the solution, then read the problem again and again and again. And sometimes it helps as well to actually write the problem down. You know, I want to do this, and to do that, I need to do this, this, and this. So that's what I definitely recommend. So reread the challenge, the ticket, the task more than once to properly understand it, write it out. And also something that new coders I really highly recommend doing is to write everything down without using programming, without using a programming language whatsoever. The thing is, when you're completely fresh into programming, the syntax looks like Egyptian hieroglyphs, right? They're just totally mad. Like, why would you have a dollar symbol? What's that all about? Why is there 3 equals? Surely should only be 1 equals. Why? What's the difference between 3 equals, 2 equals? What's this exclamation mark? What's a colon? Why do I have to put a semicolon on the end? You know, what is going on here? All of that is what I call street furniture. All of that is the things that just get in the way of the problem that you're trying to solve. So what I highly recommend is to write a single line for each process. Remember the input, process, output. For each process in the thing that you're trying to achieve. So, for example, if it's, say, I want to add X to Y, then write out what is X. Write out what you want Y to become. Write out that you need to have a function. Write out that you need to do that sort of addition. And then write out that you need to return that back. And then, once you've actually written that down in English or whatever your native language is, then write code around that, around the things that you've just written. You understand your English or your native language far more at this stage of your programming career, far more than you understand the programming language. Because the language is the thing that you need to learn. But you're trying to translate the problem in your head from your native language into a programming language. That's the challenge. That's the challenge. So first of all, help yourself out. Write that all out in your native language first, and then between each of those lines, those comments that you've just created, write the code. And then that's a way of reinforcing how you're going to learn it eventually. And then eventually you wouldn't have to put in those comments, because you'll understand that, in certain programming languages, an addition is actually a concatenation or whatever, or the fact that you have your data types wrong. Maybe you need to cast that, but you need to identify those concepts, those programming concepts first, and you need to explain that in readable form. And your readable form is not yet programming, because you're trying to translate that in your head to a programming language using the syntax. Okay, so yes, is it a problem with my understanding of a programming concept? So have I understood that all the programming things that I'm using for this challenge actually make sense? Do I know what the difference is between an integer and a Boolean? Do I know what the difference is between a for loop and a for each loop or a while loop, or do I know what a double ampersand is in an if statement? Do I know what an if statement is? Do I know what an else statement is? Do I know the fundamentals of looping? If you're coming up against a programming concept in a bug that you're trying to solve and you don't understand that programming concept, go away and learn that, and then come back to the problem. This all comes back to the last point that I'm going to make right at the end of this. But the number 3 in this, ask yourself these 3 things when debugging, is it a problem with my implementation of the programming language? So once you've established that you've actually read and understood the challenge, the task, the ticket, that you're or the bug that you're trying to solve, once you know in your head, how you should solve that in a sort of English or your native language, and if you've realized that if you are aware that of all the programming concepts in this you understand, then it's probably a problem with the implementation of the programming language. You've probably put some of that street furniture in the wrong place. So go and check that out. Okay, so number 4 is a big one. I've said this before. Number 4. I've said this before many times, and this is asking for help. So the thing is, I use this very simple example of addition, so adding X to Y. But actually, that's for a new programmer, that's actually quite a challenge. It's quite a challenge to do. If you were to tell me how to say add X to Y in, I don't know, Mandarin, I wouldn't be able to tell you because I don't understand the language, their language. I don't understand Mandarin. I've never spoken Mandarin. So that's like asking a new, completely new programmer, completely fresh to programming, can you write me a function to do an addition to return what X plus Y is, passing in both X and Y? I mean, so ask questions. Ask questions. Ask for as much help as you possibly can, and don't ever be afraid that you're asking too much help, because there's never too much help. There's never a point where someone is asking too much, unless of course it turns into, can you just do my homework? Because that's not helping. That's the difference between helping and getting someone else to do it. You want to make sure that every time you ask a question, you have that ingrained, that answer ingrained, so you don't have to ask that question again. And if you're new to programming and you're or if you're not new to programming, you're in your first job. If you're in your first job and you're not asking questions, then you're wasting time. If you're in a room full of programmers who you know are far superior at programming just because they've been there for longer than you are, and you are not absorbing their knowledge like a sponge, then you're wasting your time. And this is the problem that I had when I started. I wasn't asking enough questions, and I saw the failures, which is a point we'll get to in just a second, as a failure of a reflection upon myself, rather than a learning opportunity, which is point number 5. This is the last one. So learn that failure is just a learning opportunity, and that success is made from a mountain of failures. If you think about how many bugs one can fix in a day, that those bugs need to be tested. Those tests usually don't work first time, and so they're failing tests. We have this concept called failing tests, TDD. So you've got to create a failing test first. Programming is all about failing. It's a failing, the culture teaches you to accept failure. Without failure, you do not know if your program is going to pass, in the sense that without writing a failing test, you don't have the appreciation of the specification of that program. That's another topic, TDD. But what I'm saying is that without going through several layers of failure, you'll never get to the end, the end goal, the fix, the resolvement of your particular issue. And I could tell you that there are bugs that haunt me and have haunted me for days, if not longer. And there's some days where it's like I haven't actually succeeded in any of my bug fixing because I'm stuck on this challenge. And if you flip it on the head, so you're not actually looking at bugs, but you're looking at new features, well, you need to try different things in order to get a feature to work. Not everything is going to work straight away. Hardly anything does work straight away. In fact, I can't even think of a feature that worked straight off the bat with some of the projects that I've been doing recently. It's always been, oh yeah, this hasn't worked, so we'll try a different way. Or, oh yeah, this does work, but it's not very performant, and therefore it's classed as a failure. So we need to speed it up, and therefore we rebuild it, doing something completely differently. We look for the pinch points and where the performance is, the failing areas of the code, and then we fix them. So get into the idea that failing in programming is actually moving forward, and it's never a reflection of how good or how bad you are as a programmer. It is just a reflection of the things that you're learning. That's all it is. It's just the things that you're learning. And I think those 5 things, I'll recap. I think those 5 things, if I was taught those, if someone just came up and did a lecture and just mentioned those 5 things before I actually wrote a single line of code, I would be like, oh yeah, this isn't actually so bad. So number 1 is to care more about the concepts than the tools. That's number 1. Number 2 is to try all the things more than once. So try, say, like, for instance, if you get fed up of React, try Vue. Don't just give up on JavaScript. Ask yourself 3 things when debugging. So have I read the task, ticket, or challenge more than once? So have I understood the thing that I'm actually trying to achieve? Is it a problem with my understanding of a programming concept that I'm trying to use? So I'm trying to use a for loop. Do I understand what a for loop does? I'm trying to convert a string to an integer. Do I understand how I can cast that correctly? Is it a problem with my implementation of the programming language? So have I used the street furniture in the wrong way? Is there a problem with say, one of my curly braces are in the wrong way? Curly brackets are in the wrong way. Have I not put a semicolon on the end here and there? I suppose this is where IDEs do come in really well, because they can show you, they can prompt you, with little highlighting things, but don't get too bogged down, as I mentioned, with the tooling. When I started to code, I was using Notepad. Ask for help more. Keep asking for help. If you come home from work and this is your first ever job in programming and you're still scratching your head because you haven't asked a question, then don't do that. don't do that. You want to come home with answers. You want to come home with answers, and you want to find someone who is able to teach you and sort of take you under their wing and improve you. And by improving you, it means that you will be asking less questions or more challenging questions, which will improve them. Think of it like that. And the last one is to learn that failure is just a learning opportunity and that success is made from a mountain of failures. So don't ever go in thinking, oh, I'm going to fix every single bug today because I'm awesome and because I know everything about programming. That never happens. that never happens whatsoever. We are problem solvers. And I suppose I should say that, in my opinion, we don't get hired because we know the programming language. That is an afterthought. We are hired because we are problem solvers. We solve problems. And in order to solve a problem, we must test different solutions. And by testing different solutions, we must accept that there's going to be failures. And we'll only ever land on one solution because that's the production code. So you need to go through a raft of failures before that is the thing that I'm actually going to commit and push up to GitHub. That is the solution that I've decided upon because I've tried all of the other stuff. That hasn't worked. I've failed on those things have failed. Not I failed. Those things have failed to solve the problem. But this works. And therefore, I've needed to go through those steps of failure to get to that point. Okay. So just having a look at the comments now. Bernard, let's see. Can you share on the Discord channel before the end of the live stream? Of course I can. It's howtocodewell.net/Discord. I'll put this, I'll type this out very quickly. Let's just I'll jump on the net. I'll just grab the link. It's never easy to do this on, can't even remember. It's never easy to do this on a podcast or a video because you're scrambling around like a headless chicken. There we go. Okay, I'll put it in the chat here. There you go. howtocodewell.net/Discord. It's totally free to join. And there's a community there of programmers, and we answer each other's coding questions. Like I mentioned before, there is a suggestions new channel that I've added there today, where you can suggest ideas to me for courses and videos and tutorials and podcast topics. That would be pretty cool. So if you've got any ideas, then post those in that channel. Bernard's saying, I have a request for an interview video. Okay. I would like to see the way you interview people and what kind of answer you expect from the candidate. That's an interesting one. So yeah, I have interviewed people before. I've been brought on as I suppose you would call it a developer, sort of the developer guru in the room, I suppose. That sounds awful, but there was a couple of times where I've been brought in an interview from a technical capacity, and obviously there was like HR there and other people there or project owners there who weren't as technically minded, and they relied upon me to come up with questions and to assess the answers, as well as vetting the CVs beforehand. So it's quite an extensive job. It's not just a case of, here's 5 candidates, go and spend the morning with them. It was a case of, here are 50 CVs. Now let's whittle them down to 5, and then off you go, Pete. It wasn't 50, it was like 20. Let's put you into an interview room, and then do a debrief at the end, and then hopefully pick the best. But yeah, it's always really weird having that sort of sense of responsibility and power, and sort of I think when I was doing that, I was very empathetic, or at least I was trying to be, because I hate interviews. I suck at interviews so bad myself, being the interviewee. So yeah. But that would be an interesting topic to do. I'll give that some thought. Yes, well, it's the front door, isn't it? It's you say this is the part where most people fail at the interview stage. Definitely, like this is trying to get into the front door, and if you can't get into the front door, then that's tough. That's tough. I have some very strong views on why interviewing is, at the moment, certain interviews are really bad. But I think I would like to condense my thoughts and maybe come out with some sort of bulleted list like what I've got in my notes at the moment for this topic today to list those out. And it's very difficult because it's different for different people. Some people really like interviews, some people hate them, and some people prefer interviews that have certain things in them. I mean, I can give you some horror stories. I won't today, but yeah. Anyway, you mentioned asking a question sometimes doesn't work for other people. I was fired my first job asking too much. Oh, okay. Right. That's an interesting topic. Question there. You mentioned asking questions sometimes, and that sometimes doesn't work for other people. I was fired. I think I was fired on my job because I was asking too many questions because I didn't know the framework. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a fine line. It's a fine line. The questions I think I'm referring to are more to do with the questions about the specification rather than the street furniture, rather than the tooling that you're using. If you're being hired to be a programmer, say a React developer, then you should know React, right? But it really depends on what the questions were, because if you were asking really sort of basic questions, then that is going to take the time of the person that you're asking the question of or to. And that can be seen as a bit of a drain of resource. And so I've heard this before, where people ask too many questions that are of a very foundation level, and they've applied and got into a position where it's not foundation level, it's perhaps more junior level or even senior level, and so the expectation there is different. So what I would do is use that as a learning opportunity. So for all of the questions that you did ask, you want to ensure that you are 100% confident with those concepts now. So going forward, you won't have to ask those questions again. The other thing with university and college, this is moving into a different topic here. But the thing about colleges, universities versus boot camps and learning to code on your own is the fact that when you're in university and you're in college or what have you, when you're in a group of people and that group of people is being taught by a lecturer, then you have a safe space to ask questions without having too much without exposing too much of your level of programming, right? There's no monetary value associated to your learning level at that stage. There is when you're working in a company, right? And you're exposing how little of the programming language, the framework that you've said you know on your CV, but if you're exposing how little you know to the company that is paying you to know that, then that's a different story. And if you're doing this in, say, university or college, you have a nice little safety net of a nice and friendly environment where you can ask questions to your fellow students or the lecturer with only risking dropping a grade, and they shouldn't drop you a grade just because you've asked a question. But it's very different if you're working and you're being paid for the things that you should know. So it's a real balancing act. Yeah, I mean, so that's a challenge, because it was because you're saying about being hired to learn the thing, so learning on the job. Without knowing the ins and outs there, it's a difficult one to answer that, because if they hired you to learn on the job, then you should be entitled to ask the questions, but it really depends on what kind of the questions were and whether or not the work was actually being done. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting. I think what I'll do is I'll go away with that and think about sort of condensing my thoughts down into some sort of biteable podcast episode, and might come back to that. But yeah, certainly put down a Laravel course if you want to in the Discord in the suggestions part. But interesting. Thank you ever so much for joining, though, Bernard. That was so a good set of questions there. Okay, so before I shoot off, I just want to say that this weekend I'm going to be doing the code review for, well, it was way back in November we did this challenge. If you go to codingchallenges.howtocodewell.net, I'll put the link in the show notes below. There is a coding challenge, and I should be doing a challenge, every month. And this month, or in November, I know that we're way back into December now, but whatever. This one is to build an advent calendar in JavaScript. The idea is that when you click on a window in the advent calendar, it should display a pop-up, and that pop-up will have a link or a video or anything embedded of something that you've learned in programming in 2020. And the idea is that on Twitch over the weekend, I'm going to be not only reviewing the code on Twitch, which is what I do, but also having a look at what other people have learnt in 2020 and sharing that. And we'll be doing this probably because it's late now, throughout the end of December, maybe going into January, and I'll be opening up people's advent calendars and seeing what they've learnt. So there's a couple of levels to this. The first one is to create a grid of 24 squares, and then the next one is, create a clickable square that opens up a modal. The modal will have a link to either a blog post or an embedded video or embedded podcast of something that you've learned in 2020 to do with programming. And then what I do with these challenges is I pull them down from GitHub and I review the code, and we talk about the code that people have submitted. And then with this one, because it's interactive, we'll actually go and have a look at what people have learned. And I think that's going to be really good to get involved. So if you've got some spare time, I know it's pretty short notice, but if you've got some spare time and you want to submit your challenge, then please do so, and use the Coding Challenges channel on Discord to post the link. If you go to codingchallenges.howtocodewell.net, you can see the latest challenge, and it's got the rules and the sort of the how-to guide there. But anyway, I'm going to shoot off and chill out for the rest of the evening. Thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everybody. Ooh. I've just been asked a quick question about that. So I will, no calendar library, no frameworks, right? Just pure CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. Well, yeah, preferably. However, if you want to use Vue because you know Vue or React, then by all means do it. It's not graded, right? I'm not going to give you a certificate. I give better kudos to people who do this in vanilla stuff. I'm, as you can probably guess, I'm more geared towards people understanding the programming concepts rather than the tools, hence the trend of the last few episodes. So if you're fresh into programming, then I recommend doing these challenges through vanilla JavaScript, vanilla CSS. But if you're well versed in that and your day-to-day job is React because you're paid as a React developer and you've been doing it for years and years and years, then go for it. Hey, you'll teach me something. So everybody's a winner. But it's not always JavaScript, I should say. These challenges have ranged from Python to PHP to JavaScript to specific framework things. There was even a challenge earlier this year where we built a game, a JavaScript game. There was a regex one as well. that was very frustrating. That was a really difficult challenge. Regex, I really am not a fan. But who is? So yes, so we created a fighting game, a turn-based game on roll the dice based game in JavaScript, and that took I think that took 3 months to do, three challenges to finish off. I might do one similar to that next year, who knows? But I won't be giving it away tonight though. No, but I do know what we're going to be doing in the next challenge. It's going to be, because it's January, it's going to be a bit of a mind teaser, I think, a mind teaser, a mind challenge. But anyway, I'll let everybody know when that's happening. That's this weekend. It's going to be in the afternoon at 14:30 GMT. It will probably be on Saturday, but I will definitely let everybody know on Discord as well as on Twitter. So if you're not following me on Twitter, please do, at How to Code Well. But anyway, thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everybody. And I will see you again soon. Cheers. Good night. Bye-bye. Again, I don't know how to turn this off. Here we go.